Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Agents to Owners podcast. Today, I am looking forward to sitting down with Jennifer Standish, founder of Prospecting Works, now in North Carolina, Greenville, North Carolina, but originally from New York, New York. In addition to running Prospecting Works, Jennifer is also an author, speaker, and leadership coach. Jennifer, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I am excited to sit down with you, learn a little bit more about your business and what you do. So why don't you give us a little background of Jennifer and bring us up to you starting Prospecting Works?
Yeah. So I Prospecting Works is a cold calling consultancy. I design outbound calling programs for companies, small businesses, and I also teach people how to cold call from a place of authenticity and integrity and a willingness to help. And so my process is very warm and fuzzy. It appeals to women and introverts and to people with call reluctance. And I started cold calling, back 2001. And then, for myself, I was working for a marketing consulting firm, and didn't realize how good I was at it. And then when I left and started, a wood turning business, because I want to get out of corporate America and I'm an artist, I started setting appointments for other people. And was really good at it. And I built my entire wood turning business setting appointments as an appointment setter. And then I started coaching. I started working for other cold calling trainers, coaching their clients. And then in 2019, after working with a bunch, I just realized, I was like, there's this piece that's missing in all cold calling training. Because now I was the cold caller, and then I was the appointment setter, and then I was the coach. I was like, what's really missing is mindset and technology and delivery, working with people with their voices, because it's 80% of cold calling success is how you sound.
Yeah.
If you have a great delivery but a mediocre script, you're still going to set appointments. But if you've got a great script and a terrible delivery, terrible voice, you're not going to set anything. So that's when I launched Prospecting Works, where I wanted to do it soup to nuts, holistic, everything that you need to be successful. And so I love it.
So what has that been like, launching your own business? Talk about that journey a little bit. So you had this kind of expertise, which I think is fascinating.
Yes.
That someone has a passion for cold calling. And what has the process been like of starting your own business, finding companies to work with? What has that been like?
It's, what I have found is that most people they don't want to learn how to cold call. They just want you to do it. They're just like, well, can I just hire you to do this? Can I just hire you to do this? And I'm somebody's like, no. I want to teach you how to fish, because if you know how to cold call, you will be employed for life, because you can always become an appointment setter, right? What happened to me was I kind of put myself out there and realized nobody, it was a struggle in the beginning because people just wanted me to do it for them. But then I realized, then what started to happen was, and I was very active on LinkedIn, was a lot of women and a lot of introverts and a lot of people with call reluctance were coming to me for help, because they did not, the other people out there in the space, they were too aggressive. It was too aggressive for them, and it didn't align with their internal moral code. And so that's where I ended up finding success. And then working with people with call reluctance, that was fascinating, because call reluctance, there's 12 different types, and each require different sort of, prescription to overcome. I was watching my clients, the trajectory of their lives were completely changing once they learned how to cold call. And it was because the coaching that I was doing was really transformational. And so I kind of split last year and started doing more transformational coaching work, because what I realized was, in working with call reluctance folks, was that I was really healing people and healing wounds, because call reluctance really stems from, in my opinion, childhood. It
Yeah.
comes from all of the foundational rules that we are taught as children, to not interrupt, to don't be a pest, to speak until spoken to, all that sort of stuff. So going back and uncovering all of the limiting beliefs that we're taught as children that make us pleasant to be around, that then freed people to become great cold callers and to do it in a way that felt authentic to them.
Yeah.
So it's been a
Authentic, I
great
think, is
journey.
such I thought authentic, I think, is such a key piece to that.
Yes.
Um,
Yes. And it makes such a difference in how you sound.
yeah. Yeah, because it's your words, and it's your comfort level, and when I know you speak a lot with how important confidence is, and
Yep.
that's everything. It's so much more if you're using your own words or something that could come out of your mouth, you're speaking more confidently about it. If you're reading from a script and I wouldn't say it like that, no, you're not going to sound confident.
Right. And speaking of scripts, I really believe in scripts as a way to prepare for cold calling, because you do need an outline. You do need to, if you want to maintain control of the conversation and be able to anticipate the objections that people are going to receive, you do need to sit down with a script and outline it. But when I write scripts with clients, first of all, I write them with them using words that they naturally use.
Yeah.
And so I'll start off with, well, this is what I would say, but you're not me. So tell me
Yeah.
what words need to change, what phrases need to change, what is, let's make it yours.
Yeah.
And I don't think a lot of coaches spend a lot of time. They're more about, well, just read it like an actor, like, because it really, you have to, if you could do that,
Yeah.
we just read it and internalize it and make it your, and become so familiar with it that it just rolls off. Well, I'm just like,
Yeah.
let's just write it in your words.
Yeah. It's
It sounds
smart.
like you. Yeah.
What were some of what made you a good cold caller, would you say?
I approached it, well, I made one very bad cold call and said I'm never doing that again. And then reached out to a cold calling coach who I actually ended up working for. And and began coaching her clients. And I just did exactly as I was told. I had no fear, and I'm a good student, and I had no preconceived notions of how to do it. It was just like, all right, tell me exactly what to do and I'll do it. And I achieved success. So, but it's interesting because I am an introvert.
Mm.
You know, but one of the things that I've always done is I've always made sure that whoever I'm calling for, I believe in. And that's something that is pretty controversial, but I really believe that you have to love the company, the service that you're providing. Like, you have to be aligned with it in
Yeah.
order to call, and have that kind of passion and conviction.
Yeah.
And
So
so that's one of the things that I've always done is I've always called for people that I believe in, and the management, and even management. I mean, I've stopped working for people because the product was great, but the management was terrible. Because here, the thing is cold callers build businesses. And so
yeah.
I didn't want to build a business for a management team I didn't like. So I always stayed true to myself. And
Yeah.
then I always insisted on, cold calling success does come down to the list that you're calling from. You've got to have a highly targeted list. You can't don't call them thousands of people, hundreds of people. A highly targeted list of 35 people will yield you better results than calling 500. So I always spend a lot of time on making sure that my list was really tight.
Yeah. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, and then the delivery, and then just a good voice.
You've said, and you've touched on it a couple times, that introverts actually make better cold callers. So I really want to hear why this
Well, I don't
might
know.
be the case.
I don't know that they make better cold callers,
Okay.
but I think that introverts often feel as if like they can't cold call, or they can't even really be in sales. And I would say, let's challenge that limiting belief, because I do believe that an introvert who passionately believes in what they're calling about will sound so much so much better and so much, very different than most of the cold callers out there. And I think that people want to speak with human beings.
Yes.
They don't want to speak to somebody who is going to pressure them into something, or that whole kind of like, I'm going to poke the bear and try to find your pain point and then do this kind of gotcha. That's why we need to talk sort of thing. I think introverts approach it from, they have a bigger hurdle. And I think that they may approach it with a little bit more honesty and integrity. And, I go back to it as authenticity.
Yeah. So that kind of plays into my next, question, which is from a post that you put out there a few months ago, I think, which says, I am dedicated to assisting those who, like me, tend to be the wallflowers in the room, individually who are afraid to speak up, withhold their brilliance, and shy away from contributing out of fear of ridicule.
Yeah.
So, which for me, when we talk about, introverts and getting into something like this, it can be terrifying to cold call, and especially when you first start out.
Yeah.
But for an introvert or a wallflower like this,
Right.
it has to be excruciatingly difficult.
Yes.
And obviously part of, the key to cold calling is confidence. How do you build confidence, and how do you get them over these massive hurdles?
Right. Mindset.
Yeah.
It's going back into, it's starting with your mindset and saying, do you believe in what you're calling about? Do you believe that you can actually help these people? And let's talk about who these people are and why they need you. And, it's looking at the value that the person is providing, less than what the service that or the product that they're actually delivering, And so, I was working with a gentleman who sold cleaning products. And I was like, yeah, okay, you sell cleaning products, but what you actually do is you help them. And he sold to auto dealerships. It's like, you help auto dealerships keep their offices and their locations clean and germ free, and you help them sanitize places and keep people healthy. I mean, that's what this is about, is like you help people from getting sick. You help these So it's always like, okay, yes, you may provide cleaning supplies, but what exactly do those cleaning supplies do? That is the value that you provide. And once he had that shift,
Yeah.
and so for commercial insurance, you put roofs over babies' heads, you keep food on the table. With business continuity insurance, you make sure that when a business collapses through a catastrophe, that business's employees get paid, and those employees, well, they have babies, and they, it keeps the roof over the head, it keeps food on the table. I mean, commercial insurance, you couldn't do business
Right.
without it, like because nobody would accept these risks. So what you do is so important and so critical. It's not just about the policy that you're setting, it's like what that policy does.
The value.
So
Yes.
if you passionately believe in what commercial insurance does, and you want to work with a particular niche, and you specialize in that niche, then let's go call those people and just ask for an introductory appointment. You're not selling them anything. You're just asking for an introductory appointment. Just let me introduce myself. And so the barrier goes way down when it's just an introductory appointment. And I'll even tell people, listen, I'm not going to ask you to switch providers. I'm not going to ask you to, give me a job. I'm not going to ask you for anything. I just want to introduce myself, so that if something happens down the road and you need another resource, or you need to replace, or whatever the deal is, I want you to call me. I want to be on your consideration list. And the only way to do that is for you to know me. And so people, if you're calling the right people, it's in their best interest to have plan Bs in place, and to know what's going on in the marketplace, and to know what other people offer. In fact, they would be remiss in their professional responsibilities to their organizations to not meet with you. Well, then you're going to end up scheduling a lot of appointments if you approach it from that point of view. And so what ends up happening is We do a lot of mindset work. We write scripts. We do deep dive into who they're calling. We practice a lot. And then they start making calls, and all it takes is 1 or 2 appointments, and they feel so good about themselves that they're
It's a
like,
win. Yeah.
"Do this. I can do it your way. I can't do it their way." Everybody else who's out there, like, I can't do it that way, but I can do it your way.
Yeah.
And I tell people, you don't have to make 100 calls a day. Make 20, make 10. But if you show up every single day, 5 days a week, you make 10 cold calls, and you're going to schedule so many appointments out of that, right? You're going to slowly be building your business.
Yeah. And I think that's, I think that is a great strategy, that essentially your initial call, it's not a sales call.
No, it's not.
And I love that piece that you are laying the foundation of a relationship.
Yes, this is all my process is all relationship building. It is not sales. And I know a lot of other
Mhm.
cold calling people will talk about they're looking for people who are in the market, looking for people who can buy right now, because these salespeople have quotas that they need to meet. That is not me. I am a gardener. I plant
Mm.
seeds. I'm a farmer. I plant seeds. And so, because for me in my process, the gold is really in the follow-up. So maybe you don't get the appointment the first time around, but when you ask, you try a couple times, overcome a couple objections very naturally, and then you say, what, could I just call you back in 6 months just to touch base? When you receive permission to call back, that next call is not a cold call. It's a
Right.
completely different call. And that's when you'll see the gold. It's in the follow-up. So cold calling for me and my clients, people have to understand it is going to take 6 months to get to those follow-up calls. And then people will be like, Jen, how are you? Yes, I remember you. Are you call, yes, go ahead. Well, I can meet with you now. So that's when the stats of the conversion rates of conversation to appointment ratios, that's when they go through the roof and go into double digits, because people know you already, and you did what you said you were going to do, was you were going to call them in 6 months, and that's exactly what you did. And then you're not a stranger to them. So it's a relationship management investment in time, and I'm happy to do it because very few people do.
Yeah, I really like that. And I know you, I know, I also read in some of your background that every one of our conversations should begin with honesty. And again,
Yes.
that plays into what the strategy of the call is, which is not to make that sale. And I would think, as for someone you're training, no matter what business it's in, that when you're making cold calls, it takes a little bit of the pressure off.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. It's like you don't have permission to sell in a cold call. That initial call, you don't have permission to sell, but you can ask for an introduction.
Yeah.
And then if you do get the meeting, then then you do kind of have permission to sell.
Yeah.
I still don't ask for business, and I still don't I'm still not a high pressure I'm not a high pressure salesperson. I'm somebody that um, I want to be top of mind. I want to be on their consideration list. I want them to call me first. But there have been many times where people have said, "Listen, I'm already working with somebody. I'm not going to change," and I'm like, "That's fine." Just in case something happens down the future, I would still, I don't consider it a waste of my time to come and meet with you. And they're like, okay, fine. So I go meet with them. And then, as the meeting wraps up, they may say, what, I actually have something for you. Or, I think that, something might come up in a week or two. So why don't you follow up with me? And I make it a little project, or I make it something little, and then before you know it, I've become their primary supplier or their preferred provider.
Which in our business, it makes so much sense to maintain that relationship, whether they're a customer or not, because
Yeah,
in our industry, there are so many changes going on that
yeah,
they might be working with someone right now, but whoever they're working with, their policy could change drastically
yeah,
within the next year,
right.
and they might need something different.
Right.
So although they might even be happy with their current provider, that might not be there next year.
Right.
So they're still an option down the road. So it makes so much sense to plant that seed,
Yeah.
and and don't just throw them away because you can't sell right now.
Right.
But
Right. Right.
um, yeah, I really like this. How important would you say a cold calling script is?
I think it's imperative because what you want to say is you want to introduce yourself. You want some statement of value that you provide. You want to be able to maybe perhaps name drop a few clients and then tell a little success story and ask for the appointment. Or I mean, there's lots of script formulas and that people can use. And what I do is I explore with the client, which is going to sound more authentic and is more in line with who they are. But there are tons of script formulas out there, and
Yeah,
they all work when they're matched up with the right person. I i can pull off some, others I can't, so I just kind of stick to my two or three. But I think it is important because you want to lead the conversation so that way there's a predictable outcome. And if you know ahead of time what you're going to say, you can predict the objections that you're going to hear, and you want to be prepared to address those objections. But after a while, you stop using the script. You said, but I think it's a blueprint for a conversation,
yeah,
um, that that I think everyone benefits from. If you have a team of people, it's especially important because you want everybody saying the same thing.
yeah,
Because then what you can do is you can do A/B testing. And that's one of the hardest things to get everybody, is like to get an entire team to be basically saying the exact same thing is really hard because everybody likes to wing it or whatever. But if you can get everybody to say the same thing, then you can split the team in half, and then you can test different scripts or different value statements, different approaches to see which works and which doesn't work. So there's tremendous value in scripts.
I love what you said about that you work with your cold callers to kind of develop a script together. I think that's so important because um, look, you and I can try and deliver the same message and just word it a little bit differently, or I wouldn't. That's not how I would say it. I think that gives them buy-in, gives them a little more confident. But if they help develop it, like, oh, this is how I would say it, it just flows so much easier, and they're natural and they are confident with it. So I love that.
Absolutely, absolutely. I have to, I write scripts with everybody and make sure, because I speak with a different cadence, I speak at a different speed. I come from, upstate New York. So I have a different delivery. If you're, so you have to write it to the person who's actually going to say it.
Yeah,
And so even when I'm working with teams, everybody will be slightly different, but the messages will all be same. But people pause in different places.
yeah,
People say ums in different ways. I may say I'm delighted, but that may not come out of somebody's mouth, for nobody. Somebody would say, I never say the word delighted, but I will say this. And then it was like, go ahead, then let's use that word.
yeah. Um, it sounds like you, in general, work with a lot of women.
Yep.
And you made mention somewhere along the line that um, you believe that women have an advantage over men in cold calling.
Yes.
Why is that?
So I just don't think that a lot of women cold call. And most men, it's, sales is very male dominated. And so when you hear a woman cold call, I think
Mm,
that it's and I think that we exude more empathy. I'll tell you, the people who make the best cold callers are grandparents, older people. I mean, I've trained a grandmother how to cold call, and she was insanely successful. And I've spoken to other people in the cold calling space, and uh, Connect and Sell has a great story about three senior citizens, I think in New Hampshire, helped this Israeli company like turn around and sell themselves for $100 million. And it was basically 3 senior citizens, because you're never going to say no to grandma, right?
No.
I also think that middle-aged women without an identifiable accent, a dialect, that do really well. So a woman my age, middle-aged, we have the confidence to cold call. We don't sound like little girls, but we we just exude more warmth and empathy, and which is what I mean, people want to talk to human beings. They don't want to talk to a salesperson who's going to, like I said, poke the bear and find your pain points and be super aggressive. We're not.
Yeah.
So I work with a lot. So a lot of the cold callers that I work with are, and appointment setters. I work with a lot of appointment setters. They're all middle-aged women, and they're rocking it. They're doing great.
I know I'd mentioned to you that I agree 100%. I wanted to hear I think that there is probably more of a softness that comes by too. And that might, again, speaking for myself, and maybe this is definitely not the same of, everybody else, but I think that may kind of disarm you a little bit. You know what? I think we get a call, we learn that it's a cold call, and automatically our defenses go up.
Right.
Maybe that's just me. I'm pretty bad at that. But and I think that might kind of, I think a woman's touch might lower those defenses a little bit.
Sure.
Especially if it's done in the right way. That's my theory. I don't know if it's right or not.
No, I think so. I think I mean, listen, there are probably terrible female cold callers out there in the world who are super aggressive. But no, I think that with cold calling, it's all your voice.
Yeah.
80% of it is how you sound. And I think that getting a call from, a female, like, we're just better at it. I just have to,
not even argue.
I worked for an agency setting appointments for bankers, and across the board, their top salespeople were all middle-aged women, many of whom sounded just like grandmothers. And I remember being on a conference call very early in my working with this agency, and they were asking questions from the people on the call, and all of these women sounded like grandmothers. And I was like, what in the world? Does this agency know what they've created? This is brilliant. Nobody is ever going to say no to these women, because you don't say no to a grandmother or an older woman. You just don't, and they were insanely successful.
And I would gather, mainly because I would imagine if it's, no matter who it is, if it's more natural.
Yeah.
No matter if it's more natural, you're just, again, tying into the confidence. And if you're just having a conversation rather than if someone's reading up, like calling up, like they're a robot reading a script, that's not going to work.
Right. And if your energy is nervousness and anxiety, well, that's what the person on the other end of the phone is going to feel. Yeah. You communicate that through your voice. And so you don't want to make somebody nervous and anxious. So you better not be nervous and anxious.
How important do you think it is that they have a strong knowledge of the product that they're working in?
Well, I would say it's not as important as you might think.
Okay.
Because I know that I can set an appointment for anybody.
Yeah.
And I don't need to know very much about the product, because I'm not selling the product. I'm selling the meeting. So, and I can sell a meeting.
Yes.
Because all you're asking for is time. You're not asking for money. You're not asking for a project. All you're asking for is somebody's time. And I only need a couple minutes, whenever it's convenient. I'm not going to, I'm not asking for an hour tomorrow. I'm asking for whenever it's convenient, 10 or 15 minutes, whenever it's convenient. So,
the only reason that popped into my brain is that, how some people just start asking questions and about this or that, no matter what product it is. And of course, they're not going to have, knowledge of the ins and outs of whatever it is they're selling. And which I was thinking, just might be a turnoff to someone and give them pause. Well, this representative here does not realize, people are funny.
Yeah.
Not realizing that, well, this is the appointment setter here and not your future representative or
Right.
whoever.
Well, it can sometimes happen, but even if I'm setting appointments for myself, I like to get into a mode of I'm just setting appointments, and I'll say, you know what, I'm not really prepared to have this conversation with you right now, which is why I want to set up a meeting for like sometime later this week or early next week, because I'm in appointment setting mode, and I want to. If I have an appointment with somebody, I'm going to do some research and I'm going to come prepared. So very rarely will I transition from an appointment setting call to an actual meeting. But there are certain people, like if you're calling truckers, you're never going to you're calling farmers. If you get them on the phone, you want to have you want to try to have that conversation right
Yeah.
away. There are some situations where if you get that, you grab it. But for the most time, I put people off and say, you know what, that's exactly what I want to talk about in detail. But, and I may make up an excuse, but, I've got a meeting in 3 minutes. And so I wouldn't do it justice. I
Yeah.
really, I've got somebody standing in my doorway. So I just really if we could just schedule this for Friday, I can come back and answer all your questions. So
Well, I think it's best, just honesty is the best policy. I mean, in terms of, to be completely honest with you, here is my position. Ralph here is the one I don't know why I use Ralph as an example, but
right.
is the one to answer your questions. I can have him call you when it's convenient for you, whatever it is.
If you're an appointment setter, that's exactly how you handle it.
Yeah.
Is you say, I'm really not the right person to talk with. It's really, if you're setting the appointment for, somebody else, and most people understand that.
Why do you think it is? I know you've mentioned, people hate making calls and they hate being cold called. Why do you feel that?
Well, so not everybody hates receiving cold calls.
Yeah.
They don't. And the more sophisticated the organization, the easier it is to call into. So you're calling into IBM, you're calling into a big Fortune, 100, 500 company. They understand the value of cold calls. They're making cold calls themselves, and they understand the value of when they receive them. It's the lower middle market, the folks that a lot of commercial insurance folks call. They're the hardest ones because they do see it as a bother and intrusive, and they don't see the value in the call, and that is, I believe is there are just a lot of bad cold callers out there who rub people the wrong way. And so they make it so much harder for those of us who are calling with authenticity and integrity, to kind of get it. But not everybody hates to receive cold calls. That's not true. And not everybody hates to make cold calls. A lot of people think it's kind of fun. But I do think that there's a lot of bad players out there that ruin it, that make it more difficult for the rest of us.
What are some good strategies, for us that we, run into where, like you said, there maybe is a little bit more, maybe a little higher barrier to get through the front door, where we're calling with a product that people don't like, that in its current market is that is significantly increasing,
Right.
that which may provide more opportunity.
Right.
What's a good strategy to get over some of those barriers?
Okay, so first of all, I would check the mindset.
Yeah.
And say, are you really selling a product that nobody likes? I would say no. I would say it's essential. You cannot do business in the United States without insurance. You just can't. So everybody needs it. What I would do is I would approach it from like, understand the value that you provide.
Yeah.
And that's what you're really selling. So if you're somebody who can say, listen, I can lower your risk, which will in turn lower your premiums. Like what is it that you provide What is the value that you provide? Um, Use a highly targeted list. And
Yeah.
so, and make sure that what you're saying is relevant to the list you're calling. And you may have 5 lists, you may have 10 lists, and each one requires a slightly different script.
Yeah.
So maybe the clients that you name drop, or the success stories that you tell, maybe that changes by audience. So spend a lot of time understanding who you're calling and what they need to hear in order to just give you some time. And remember, you're only asking for time. You're not
Correct.
asking for business. And recognize that your first call is really just planting the seed. And if you
Yeah.
get an appointment, great. And if you find somebody who is, shopping their their insurance at that particular moment in time, that's a gift from God. Like that just doesn't have. Realize that
Yeah.
your appointments are really going to come in the 6-month follow up,
Yeah.
when or for commercial insurance, I would ask, when does your policy come up for renewal? And can I call you, a few months before that, so that way we can have this conversation? Because some people, you may call somebody who they just, they just renewed their policy. They don't want to think about it. They don't want to talk about it. It's a project to them that they don't want to deal with till next year. So I say, try to meet with them, try to introduce yourself to them, fine, but you're probably going to get shut down, which is fine.
Yeah.
Call them when their policy is up for renewal. Call a little bit before everybody else is going to start calling. Get on their calendar, and then you're going to have a friendly conversation. So it may take 2 calls.
Yes. I think that's what a lot of people have to realize. And I love that strategy. And that's frankly, that is what a lot of the larger commercial producers do, is they do a lot of cold calling, especially when they are calling into large markets.
Yeah.
They know that they have to plant the seed, and I'm not trying to sell you something on this call. Nobody's going to buy on that.
Yeah.
First of all, you're not going to get to the decision maker on that call anyway.
Maybe, you see, okay, there's the mindset. Maybe not. You very well might get to speak to the decision maker. And then you can say, well, when does your policy come up for renewal? Let me call a couple months ahead, so that way we have plenty of time, and we'll meet then, because I know you probably don't want to think about this right now. Now, other people might be a little bit more aggressive and say, oh, actually, this is the perfect time to talk about it, because you just closed it out. But I know it's what you're I'm a farmer. I like to plant seeds. I like to become people's best friends. I like to become a resource for somebody. So I am more than willing to invest 6 months.
Yeah.
And then call back, and then have the meeting. I don't need, like I tell people all the time, like, cold calling is not going to get you out of bankruptcy. This is a long-term investment. And if you're not willing to invest, up to the follow-up call, if you're not willing to invest that time, and I just, like we were talking about earlier, I had a client who wanted immediate returns, and I was like, you're not going to get it.
Yeah.
Not my way anyway. Not my way, which is relationship building. There may be other methodologies out there that are appropriate, that can push people into, but that's not me. So please don't hire me for that. I can't train your people to do that. I can't do that for you. I'm a farmer. And with my process, you have to have time.
I think that's well put. I don't think that most of us realize that cold calling, prospecting, it's a long game.
It is a long game. It is cold calling, which sounds so cold, is actually relationship building.
And I think
very warm and fuzzy.
I think we think of it the opposite way.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
I think
everybody thinks about it the opposite way. Even the people who are picking up the phone are like, oh my God, you're trying to sell me something right here and now. No, right? No.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad we figured that out, because that's very true. The cold calling is a long game, and should be viewed just like a lot of our other marketing materials, or putting that together.
Right. And so make sure you have enough money this is what I tell people when I'm designing outbound calling programs, is give this a year. Do you have a year to support this effort? You would give an advertising campaign a year, a marketing plan a year, a marketing strategy a year. Give this a year. Do you have a year to support this effort? Because the gold in cold calling is really in the follow-up. And so you need to be making a whole slew of calls, planting a whole bunch of seeds, with very little return. Yes, you are going to schedule some appointments because, dumb luck.
Yes, that's right.
But it's in the follow-ups. You've got to get to the follow-ups.
Yeah.
And if you are not willing to wait until the follow-ups, then don't do it. Then just don't do it. You're wasting money.
Which goes into, into selling, especially the insurance product. You have to be persistent. And that's how insurance is sold. It's very rare that someone makes a decision within the next week that they want. In specific circumstances, yes.
Yeah.
But it fits so well in our industry because we have to play our whole business is the long game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this falls right along in it.
Yeah.
I want to touch base before we jump off here. What was it like to write a book? And why don't you tell us about your book and then tell us
sure.
what it was like. Yeah.
So my book doesn't have really anything to do with cold calling. It's called Permission Granted, Live a Life Full of Joy and Peace. And originally the book, I will admit this, was just an idea that I had on writing, a lot like the Chicken Soup for the Soul books, and it was permission granted teens, permission granted women, permission granted women. It was going to be a whole bunch of these little series of little books that was with no journalistic integrity. Not that my book has a lot of not that I'm a journalist or a great writer, but it really was, it really, permission granted career. It was like all these little things, these little books. You could sell it in a series, and I shopped it off to, a whole bunch of publishers, and everybody loved it because nobody was talking about permission. Give yourself permission to do things. So I wrote the first 20 permissions, and they were gut-wrenching. And I sent it off to my editor, and I was like, this is not what we discussed, but I wanted to send this to you anyway, because these were the permissions that I had to give myself. And it ended up being 91, which are in the book. But these, the first 20 were really hard that I had to give myself in order to free myself from the trauma of being raised by a narcissist and the programming that parental narcissistic abuse does. Narcissistic parents, they rob their children of their childhoods, but also hijack their adult lives because we are not set up to succeed as adults. And so I had a really turbulent, my 20s were really turbulent for me. And so I spent a lot of time in therapy. I had a nervous breakdown. I was out of the workforce for a couple of years, just trying to undo all of the damage. And those permissions. And so the editor came back and goes, no, Jen, I think this is the book that needs to be written, not these others. This is your book. And so she goes, can you write 100 of these? And I was like, oh my goodness, can I write 100? So I went back to all of my old journals that I kept in my 20s and they just came flying out. Right. It's some of them are heartbreaking. Some of the permissions, it's organized with, this is the permission that I gave myself. And then there's the backstory. It's a very easy read and it's organized by chapters on topics and you can, bop in and out. But what I provide is like the backstory about like, why is this a permission for me? Like, why did I have to give myself permission to no longer diet or wear clothes that feel comfortable or not wear a traditional bathing suit or be okay with living an alternative life, all sorts of permissions also, so and then I provide the backstory about where it came from. And then I offer some suggestions on how maybe, you can use this to improve your life. But it's all about coming to terms with your past, looking at, I do workshops about this, about mindset and going back to your foundational rules that you're taught as children and say, okay, well, what do you believe to be true? What are the beliefs that may be holding you back, and then let's rewrite them, because it's your life. You live by your rules.
Yeah.
You don't have to live by the rules that you were taught as a child that kept you well behaved and quiet and pleasant to be around. And salespeople especially have a hard bump up against these childhood rules, because sales is about exposing yourself, about reaching out. I mean, when you think of the act of cold calling, it's about, I'm going to call a perfect stranger and I'm going to ask for something. Well, I have to firstly say something compelling about myself that is going to make them interested in me, which is hard. And then I'm going to ask for something that I want, which is I want a meeting, right? And so if you can unpack all of your childhood stuff, rewrite your rules, and say, no, I have every right to call a person during business hours to discuss business because I can help this business. If you can reach a point where you can say yes to all of those things, then you almost have this moral obligation to reach out to as many people as possible and say, I can help you. Let me help you. I can help you. But first, let's just meet.
Yeah.
Let's just first meet, right? All of that foundational stuff, I think, is really important. And so that's what that book does. Is I explored all those foundational rules that were bananas, absolutely bananas, because narcissists are crazy people.
What kind of time frame was that it took you to complete this project?
Well, it didn't take me long to write it. It took
Okay.
the publisher a long time.
Okay.
That was a bit of a nightmare. Publishers, that was a bit of a nightmare. But the whole thing was done, within a year.
Okay. Okay. How big of a challenge would you say that was?
For me, it wasn't a big
Oh,
challenge. It wasn't. It came out. It was almost effortless.
okay. Wow.
Yeah,
Good.
easy. It
Well,
was
when's your
easy.
next one coming out then?
I don't know what the next one is. I don't know what my next one should be. I'm kind of soured on the whole publishing part of it.
Okay.
Because I mean, there are so many publishing horror stories out there that I don't know that I want to do that again. But I love doing workshops, and I love freeing people from their limiting beliefs
Yeah.
and helping them live bigger, more fulfilling lives. And so much of what I do is transformational coaching. So
Wow.
it's a good gig.
Yeah, it sounds great. And it looks like you're very happy with it and
Yeah.
happy with how things are going, which
Well,
means a lot.
when you can when you can help somebody improve their lives, when you
Yeah.
can change, especially when you can change the trajectory of somebody's life, which if you learn how to cold call, you will be employed for life.
Mm.
But you also will probably heal a lot of emotional wounds in the process. Well, the spillover effect is you'll be able to better negotiate contracts. You'll be able to better, you just end up coming out of it with far more true self-confidence, true self-esteem, where you're not relying on other people to um, tell you how you should feel about, when you're not relying on somebody else for your happiness, when you can truly provide your own happiness from within. You're in a pretty powerful place. And so learning how to cold call and facing all of those demons, yes, you become a better salesperson. You have control over your sales cycle. You have control over who you work with. You are not relying on other people to recommend you or whoever comes through the door, right? I mean, it's really a proactive, like, let's take control of your business, and only work for clients who you really want to work
Yeah.
with, which is, you get to pick who you call. You just don't call anybody. So you're in control of that. But all of the other, I mean, it spills over into every other aspect of your life where
It
you
must be.
learn how to ask for what you want
Yeah.
in
Right.
relationships.
Right. It must be very rewarding for you specifically to work with, your, so-called wallflowers
Yep.
that have to overcome so much.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's true of probably in anything that you're able to help and to see them flourish
Yes.
over something that was a severe challenge to somebody is very rewarding. So So
Yeah.
let me ask you, would you put yourself in this wallflower camp when you were younger,
When I
or
was younger, definitely I had
okay?
severe imposter syndrome. And I lived with tremendous anxiety, and I was just, which led to a nervous breakdown. If I had a coach, I probably would have been, I should have found a coach, but at the time I don't think coaches were around. But yeah, I had severe imposter syndrome, and was one of those people that, like, if I just do a good job and I'm a good employee and I don't make waves and I accept all the bad assignments that come my way, someday somebody is going to recognize me. Well, that game got me nowhere, and it gets nobody anywhere. The game is all about self promotion, but you have to self promote in a way that feels right to you. And so I worked with a woman who, financial advisor, who was, almost convinced every day she went into the office that she was going to get fired for something or other. Yet she managed millions of dollars of people's money. She had a 30-year career, incredibly successful. She's not somebody that should ever have worried about her job security, and watch her kind of turn her. I helped her change the way people looked at her within her office. And so in her review 6 months later, her manager said, "Thank you so much for your leadership, because you've just done such a great job." And she was given one of the biggest raises in the department, and was given great profit sharing options, and was looked at as a true leader. And that took 6 months. And she now has more joy and more peace than she ever has before. And she she learned how to cold call, and she learned how to be a leader and a mentor. It's the best gig in the world.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Well done. If people want to work with you, find out more about Prospecting Works, what's the best way for someone to contact you?
Super easy. You can call me. I take every call that comes my way.
Okay.
845-242-8907, or you can email me at jennifer@prospecting-works.com. I'm also on LinkedIn.
Okay.
But yeah, so there's a variety of ways to get me.
Okay. I will put those in the show notes. Thank you so much for your time today. I learned a lot. This has been just as we kind of talked and this kind of hashed things through, it helped with some of my strategies a little bit. So
Yeah.
thank you
Good.
for that. And I know it's going to help others out there.
Good.
So I appreciate you spending time with us today. It's been great. I'm glad we were able to make this connection.
Thank you.
Everyone else, thank you for listening to another episode of the Agents to Owners podcast. We'll see you next week. Bye.